Hello and good evening, everyone. My name is Franklin. I'm one of the two co-founders of the Northern California Spinal Cord Injury Foundation, also better known as NorCal SCI. Welcome to tonight's presentation on rediscovering intimacy and pleasure after a spinal cord injury. It is made possible through a generous grant from the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, so we're grateful to them. We have a great presentation ready for you featuring two speakers that I will be introducing shortly, but let me get a couple of housekeeping items out of the way. First of all, you have all been muted, and that way we don't have any background distractions. If you need to pose any questions to our two speakers, please use the chat button on your screen, and I will ask all the questions upon the conclusion of the presentation during our Q&A session. The second thing is we are recording tonight's presentation, and that way if any of you need to step away or jump off this video presentation at any time, you won't miss a thing because we will be sending you the link to this video recording. So rest assured that you won't miss a single thing. So with that in mind, let me go ahead and introduce our two speakers. Lisa Skye Carle received her master's degree in occupational therapy from the Samuel Merritt University in Oakland, and she draws upon nearly 30 years of experience in occupational therapy, pelvic floor therapy, holistic healthcare, somatic therapy, mindfulness meditation, pain management, and sex education. She is the founder of Women's Intimacy After Injury Community and provides sex education and counseling for adults, specializing in sexual rehabilitation for persons with disabilities. Rafe Eric Briggs experienced a spinal cord injury in 2004, leaving him a quadriplegic. He is the founder of Sexuality, an organization committed to transforming sexuality and disability. Rafe earned his master's and PhD in organizational psychology and is a member of the American Society of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. He is a certified master somatic coach, and for the last decade, Rafe has been counseling individuals and teaching healthcare professionals on sexuality and disability at various colleges and hospitals. So it is my pleasure to introduce you to Lisa and Rafe. Take it away, please.
So we're going to talk about spinal cord injuries and relationships today and how sexuality is impacted. And I'll just introduce myself, and then Rafe will introduce himself. And as Franklin already said, I'm an occupational therapist. I am a sexual health clinician. I've worked in the health and wellness field for 30 years. And in 2009, I did a case study and presented at the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists on transfer of orgasm. And Rafe.
And my name is Rafe Eric Briggs. I am a organizational psychologist, did a PhD and master's in org psych. I'm also have worked as a master's somatic coach, mostly in the field of executive coaching. But in 2004, I had an experience where I broke my neck, fell from a one-story building in India, and became a quadriplegic instantly, C5-6. So it's been about 16 years. And part of that journey along the way in rehab, I was looking for guidance around sexuality and intimacy and didn't find much. So I began my own journey of discovering what's out there and what I could learn. And in the meantime, I've developed a bit of education around that. So I started an organization called Sexuality.org. And we counsel people with disabilities and healthcare providers around intimacy and disability or sexuality. Okay. So this is kind of an overview of our outline or what we're going to be covering tonight. Communication skills, also how to navigate and work with pre-established relationships. Dating, especially during a COVID period. And then we'll be talking about toys and adaptive equipment, different sexual activities for people with spinal cord injury, and then how medications can either enhance or decrease our sexuality.
All right, so I'm going to talk about communication before you have sex. And this is true for anyone, but it's a good thing to just review. So it's better to talk about sex when you're not in the bedroom. So prior to having sex, it's great to encourage your partner, encourage them to ask questions, especially if you have an injury, questions about what they need to do to make sure that you are comfortable and you don't get more injured, just in general. Share what you might want to do so you guys can share with each other. It may happen, it may not, but it kind of sets the tone for how that sexual connection will happen. Safer sex conversations. So definitely talk about your STI, sexually transmitted infection status. When's the last time you were tested? What the results of those tests were? What your plans are for protecting each other. And now we need to talk about COVID. So what are you doing to keep yourself safe during this time with this pandemic? And whether, who you want in your circle, who do you feel comfortable with sharing space with? Do you need to have masks on? Do you just want to meet over Zoom? And we'll talk a little bit more about options for kind of more virtual online connections. And then boundaries. It's very important for everyone, but in particular, if you're injured, what parts of your body do you want to be touched or not touched? What kind of activities do you just don't want to do? Like, don't even go there. And it's, the term safe word is used in the more kinky community, but it's really helpful for everyone to kind of think about. You may want to use green, yellow, red, which is kind of typical in kink. Yellow means like, I'm liking it, but I'm beginning to not like it. I'm sort of on the fence. Versus red is like, I want to stop and let's do something different. I mean, you can use those or just kind of think in your mind as well. It's like, if you're going into a place of, I'm liking it, but not as much as I would, it's good to communicate then rather than when it's an absolutely no. So you don't necessarily need to use those colors, but it's nice to keep in your mind that it's useful to talk when you're in a yellow zone and be able to steer the interaction in a way that continues to feel pleasurable.
Okay, communication. So one thing that's very important is to get informed consent around all these different activities, so that your partner knows how your injury affects your sexuality. And in my experience, it's good to like be upfront about this, like explaining bowel and bladder. It's possible sometimes to have accidents, depending on how you manage your bladder. Myself, I have a suprapubic catheter, so I always bring that to people's attention that this is part of my body, and this is how I manage it, and just kind of normalize it so that it's not becomes something that's difficult to manage later on. And then also just making sure your bowel program, I would say, if you can do a bowel program before you have sex, that's ideal. Then you don't have to worry about any accidents happening. Bed mobility, maybe you need help getting in and out of bed, and you need to communicate, is this something that you want your partner to do, or is it something that you'll have caregivers do? Same thing with positioning. Some of us are not as mobile, so we need help repositioning. And again, partners sometimes are very fine with that. I've had other times actually dated somebody else who was also had a disability. So we needed some repositioning, which was fine, depending on the caregiver that I asked when we talked about all this up front. So, that made it a lot easier. Because it can be a kind of an awkward conversation sometimes. And this kind of goes into the need for caregiver assistance. So yeah, sometimes we need to ask for outside help, whether it be from a caregiver, family member, someone close to us that is willing to help us have an active sex life. And then the last one is timing. Lisa, do you want to say a little bit about that? I'm not sure what you meant.
Yeah, I think it's important for the partner to realize that spontaneous sex may not happen as frequently, or not at all. It really depends on your level of injury, your mobility needs, but it's good to know that you may need to plan in advance, and also you are going to want to do your bladder management and perhaps bowel management, so that requires timing as well. Medications would require timing. So it's just, I think it's useful before engaging with a partner that they just know that that's part of what you need to do. So there's no surprises. I think this communication before kind of sets the stage so there's less surprises. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about communication during sex. So it's really very helpful to focus on what's pleasurable. So I know it's really challenging for many of us. We really want to get to a particular experience, whether, you know, that's orgasm, ejaculation, high peak levels of arousal. But I really encourage you to kind of try to keep that on the shelf or on the back burner, not get rid of it completely, because that might happen. But it also, when you have a spinal cord injury, it's not a sure thing. It's not completely reliable. It may happen, it may not happen. And if you get very focused on that goal, psychologically, it can really get in the way of you being able to have fun in the moment. So that's where the focus on the pleasure is really focus on what's feeling good right now and try to move that goal-oriented thoughts to the side. And then it's really important for your partner to hear tons of positive feedback about what you like that they're doing well. Give it, verbal feedback is usually the clearest feedback, but you can also put your hands in certain areas to indicate that you're liking that. And, inevitably you're going to want something different. And especially in new relationships, it's really helpful to have a ton of positive with a little bit of like, hey, and I'd also like this a little differently. Could you like move over a little bit or go there and not there as much? But really lean towards a lot of positive feedback. And when you have some quote negative feedback, it would be more of a request for something different. Not that they are doing something wrong. It's just that you've changed what you want to do right now. And then again, safe words, I didn't intend to put it on 2 slides, but again, the takeaway from that is to really be aware when you're beginning to be like, I don't like this, or, oh, this isn't feeling comfortable, before it gets to a point where it's that you're really frustrated or angry. Speak up when it's more in that yellow zone so that you can continue to have that positive feedback and just request things are different rather than, we need to stop and I'm not happy.
All right, difficult conversations. There's lots of times where we have things that come up in our relationships that are difficult to communicate. And so, it's being artful about this. I would say, one thing that could be helpful is to be able to set a timer so you have equal interrupted sharing and talk only about your experience and your feelings. So not what the other person is doing or not doing, but more about how you're experiencing this person and what you're feeling inside. And then the other thing is you could do is empathize with the other person. You could say, I think you might be feeling this, and you might be needing this. And that's something you could do just to empathize. And you could be on, you could be off, but they could say, no, I don't quite feel that way, but that's close. And this is just a way to kind of bridge those difficult conversations. But even though they're very challenging, they can build a lot of intimacy. So that's something to keep in mind when you're moving through these conversations.
Yeah, I'm going to add a little bit.
Sure.
Sexuality can bring up both incredibly wonderful and pleasant thoughts and physical feelings, but it also can be difficult, especially when you're going through a really hard time, a hard phase in your life. Having conversations about what you want to do differently can bring up your own grieving, your own upsetness and frustration with it. And also, if it is a pre-established relationship, we'll talk a little bit more. Yeah, both of you are grieving. If it's a new relationship, that other person may really be fumbling and really don't know, you know, they may not know what questions to ask. They may feel like they are not good at something. And so really know that getting through those difficult conversations can be a positive thing. So. This one's for Rafe.
Yes, caregiver hiring question, excuse me. So this is something I think about when I'm hiring new people, just to make them aware that, you know, having a fulfilling sex life is considered an activity of daily living. And so, you know, just making them aware in the very beginning that you are, during the interview process, that you're sexually active, that you might need assistance with XYZ. And, you know, it could be whatever you need assistance with, you could put it out there to see what the response is and to see where their boundaries are. And some people are going to be very sex positive and probably comfortable with it. Other people may not be. So that's a way just to feel into, is this going to be a good fit long term? Because you are going to be spending a lot of intimate time together, not sexually intimate, but just, you know, when caregivers and clients are working together, there is, you know, there needs to be a lot of trust. And so that's something where you can feel that out in the very, very beginning. Some specific tasks and expectations could be, I need some help putting on a condom or taking it off when I'm done. I need help with setup and cleanup. You might need help with setting up a toy, or getting lubricant nearby, or cleaning a toy when you're done. So these are all things, it's important if you're not going to be doing, if you're not able to do these different activities, being able to talk about what these are and to see how this caregiver is comfortable or not comfortable with it is important. Then also just, you know, are they going to stay in the other room or do they take off? So I think the more you can negotiate and talk about this up front, the easier it can be when you're exploring with a partner. Okay.
I want to just talk a bit about pre-existing relationships. So if you were in a relationship before your injury and so your partner knows you prior to injury and is going through this whole process with you, recovering from your injury and moving on to a new, different way of relating and different kinds of relationships, just encourage you to be gracious that you are both grieving. This is hard. Your roles in the relationship and your roles and responsibilities and how you take care of your home and your children, that is all changing. Your partner may be a caregiver. So yeah, I just encourage you to be very patient as much as you can, because it's a really hard time. And to know in terms of sexuality, not only are you grieving the loss, your partner is also grieving the loss. So just really be strong for each other, be there for each other, and also get some help. If your partner is playing a significant role in your caregiving, in order to continue to have a real romantic lover kind of partnership, it's really important to get some caregiver help so that partner isn't burned out. Stress is one of the #1 killers of desire, arousal. Actually, the hormones from stress actually physiologically reduce the amount of arousal physiologically, like lubrication and everything, and also the desire. So if you're trying to keep your sex life alive during this really difficult transition, stress management and help is key. And then on top of it is, regardless of what else is going on in your life, you need to schedule some intimate time, because you may not actually be in the moment feeling it. For reasons like I just spoke, you're going through a really difficult time, it's highly stressful, you know, you've got appointments up the wazoo, you're learning, everything is new. Set aside time once a week, a couple hours, just to be intimate with each other. And that may just look like sitting next to each other and holding hands, or just naked body to body touching without any agenda for anything else. But it can still be done even in the midst of all these changes.
Okay, pre-existing relationships. There's a few more points. The first year of any injury is very, very difficult. I can speak from experience. Yeah, the first year, in fact, maybe sometimes the first 2 years can be very difficult. But know that things will usually get better, and you get through that period. You might want to just kind of focus on your health and wellness. But also, if you're in an intimate relationship, it's important to, you know, to keep that, cultivate that, so that you can keep that bond very strong. So there is a strong need for, you know, that we're both in the same team, that this is going to be something we're going to go through together. And there's times when your partner will rely on you, and there's other times you'll rely on your partner. And it's important to be able to collaborate and work as a team. That will build a really strong relationship. It does have the potential of bringing you closer together. It does have the potential of also tearing people apart, unfortunately, because it is a very traumatic and challenging time. That's why I really highly recommend get some counseling, get some coaching, either individually or as a couple. And you know, that can be either from a therapist, from your pastor, from really anyone you trust. And it could be, you know, someone that also specializes in sexuality and intimacy, relationship counselor too. So just really important to really focus on how are you going to get through this year, and how do you guys stay connected as a partnership.
So if you are dating after you had a spinal cord injury, when do you disclose that you have a disability? So for instance, if you're doing online dating, and do you put your photo of you being in a chair on your profile? Do you not? I don't think there's a right way of doing it. In fact, I know a handful of people who do it differently. Some people, it's front and center, here's my disability. Other people don't say anything until they show up in person. And that's just something it's an individual choice. And then where to find people to date? Well, we're in a pandemic, unfortunately. It's hard on everyone. So online dating is great. Zoom is amazing, or FaceTime, whatever your platform of choice is. Virtual sex is quite fun. You can do lots of fun things on a webcam. There are online webcam platforms. I think Rafe and I were talking about some he can share with you. And also, if you want to get together in person for dates, you can do socially distanced activities, out, obviously all the precautions of being outside and masked and so forth, and then start having conversations just like you would about safer sex. It would be safer COVID kind of talks. What is your risk level? Like, what are you comfortable with? This person that you might want to spend more intimate time together, what are they doing in your day-to-day life? It's a whole new level of conversation that I kind of equate it with a sexually transmitted infection kind of conversation. There's no such thing as safe, but there is safer. Rafe, did you want to talk a little bit about more virtual?
Well, as far as virtual sex, there are different technologies out there. Some of those are virtual headsets you can wear. They also have, we'll get into sex toys in a little bit, but there are a certain type of sex toy. I believe the term is called teledildonics. It's kind of mouthful.
I have heard of teledildonics, yep.
Yeah, and so it's a way to connect sexually with your partner using technology. So we'll talk more about that, but that is another avenue. It's not so much in the dating, well, it is dating, but it's something where, even if you are across distances on the other side of the world, there's still a way that you can be connected with your partner. Also, there's, virtual chat rooms. There's a lot of these now, these different webcam rooms. Some of them do charge, and some of them are free, depending on where you look. An example would be one site's called Chatterbait. That's a free one. That's pretty reputable place to find people to chat with and to kind of explore sexual play. So as far as like dating, I've done a little bit of dating in the COVID era. Mostly it's been on Facebook with friends of friends, and I've done some video chats and then other in-person dates. But I'm always, I have a protocol of asking lots of questions about, what people's habits are. So just really make sure before you get involved with somebody, just really learn about their life. And if they have caregivers, if other people around, find out how much interaction they're having. So you can make a really educated choice to spend time with somebody if you do decide to spend time physically in the same space. That's all I want to say about that.
So this is a pretty common thing of having paid caregivers and having chemistry with them. And both Rafe and I talked about it quite a bit, and we both agreed that you proceed with caution. There are power dynamics between kind of an employer-employee, which is the relationship when you have a paid caregiver. And there can be difficulties in balancing that power dynamic and the boundaries about what can and can't be done, and timing and when. It's a lot to think about. It's not impossible, but it's something that you really need to think through. And there are risks and rewards. And, obviously the rewards are, if it pans out that this is a really good connection and a good relationship, it would be worthwhile. But the risks are drama. The risk is losing a caregiver that you really enjoy being around. Maybe there's, drama. There could be any level of drama and losing someone that you felt like was a really good caregiver. And then, I'd imagine it's quite common to get turned on by a caregiver that you're attracted to that is helping you with your daily activities. So all of your dressing and toileting and bathing, and you're having a caregiver that you think is attractive. And how do you manage that? So I'm going to ask Rafe that in a bit. And then for men, having erection while you're doing your ADL with a caregiver, and you're not even attracted to them, or you are, but just know that you can get an erection reflexively. You don't even have to be turned on and you get an erection. So it's awkward, or at least I've heard it's awkward, and it might be useful to tell that caregiver that it's just what your body does. It's not that you are necessarily turned on at that time. Hey, Rafe, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah, I've had some firsthand experience with just not dating caregivers, but noticing that there is an attraction between myself and another person. And so just have to be really mindful about how you deal with that. And yeah, just I would say be very cautious. The only time I think it's really can work out is if you have a very adult conversation about whether that's something, first of all, the other person is even interested in. And yeah, I would just be very, very cautious with that. I have a few friends that have actually ended up dating and marrying their caregivers. So it does work for some people. Other friends, they've lost some really valuable people on their team as well. So just be really careful about that. And then, yeah, I've gotten erections before during like doing range of motion or showering, and just to acknowledge that that is something that happens just because of our spinal cord injury. It's not necessarily that you're attracted and turned on by that person. So I think just the more communication you can do, the better overall, and being able to have a good relationship with the people that you're connected to.
All right, I'm going to talk about toys and adaptive equipment. So toys can be used on yourself, and they can also be used on a partner. I like to break down categories. So dildos are something that is internal. They tend to be used with women, although some men like dildos in their anus. The thing about a man having anal sex with someone with spinal cord injury, for some people, they find that it disrupts their bowel program. So that's something to be mindful of. And then there's also vibrators, and there are vibrators that can be internal and external. There are positioning equipment, bolsters and so forth, and I'll go into it a little bit more in the next slide. There are sensory toys, which are designed to do things like, you know, warm and cold or tickly around the areas that you have sensation. And then remote control vibes and toys. And Rafe was talking about one that's very remote, like either hooked up to Wi-Fi or the internet somehow. So here's some pictures of dildos and harnesses. So let's use my little pointer. So my pointer is on a long handled dildo. I think it's made out of either silicone or plastic. And one of the things that people like about this is it's just much more, this particular one, I think it's fairly heavy. So you would have to have pretty good upper extremity strength and mobility, but it's long so that you can just access using it much more easily in terms of range of motion. And I just put in these two in terms of different shapes and materials. This one is glass. This one is metal. And this one is silicone. And I'd say these three, the glass, the metal, the silicone, are the most body safe, body friendly. This one, if it's actually plastic, I would need to learn a little bit more about what kind of plastic it is and whether it is porous, whether the material can hold bacteria and so forth. I think it's better to do the body safe ones, and they can actually go through a dishwasher to sterilize. And then harnesses, the first one that comes to mind that I think is useful for spinal cord injuries is a thigh harness. This is the only one that I have found that's even somewhat usable. I think I saw another one that just wasn't good. I have this one. We use it occasionally, but I have to say the Velcro is not in the right position for my body, but it might work for someone else's body. But this is how it goes. It's on the thigh of the person not receiving the dildo. And you can see on this dildo, there's a flange at the bottom. You need to have a flange. And here is the hole in the harness. So the dildo goes through the harness. The part that goes inside comes out of that hole. So you can see on here, that flange is against the skin. Okay, and so the receptive partner can sit on it. And I just like that there's a lot more flexibility. The partner who's wearing the harness can have his clothes on or her clothes on, You don't, to me, it makes it a little bit more, you can be a bit more spontaneous. You know, the partner can be in his chair with his clothes on and just go ahead and strap the strap on. Okay. And here's a little list of vibrators. You can have both external and internal vibrators. So examples, and I have pictures on the next slide. You can have a wand type vibrator, finger vibes, vibrating sleeves for men. There's a new one on the market called a humping vibe, which I think is quite interesting. I don't have it, but it'd be tempting to get one. The internal vibrators, you would have a vibrating dildo, and there's also dildos that are thrusting. Let's go to the next page and I will show you. Okay, so this is a finger vibe, and I put this one on here because I like that it can be used without having any grip. You don't actually need to hold on to it. There's like a little plastic sort of harness that goes on here. This is detachable, and you put a couple fingers through, and the fingers lay on either side here. You can have a caregiver. If you don't have much strength in your hands, or you know, some level of contractures, mild contractures, you'd be able to put this on and just leave it on your hand and then put the vibe wherever you'd like to put it at. This is a vibrating masturbation sleeve, and I really like this one because you do not need to have an erect penis to use it. You can put a flaccid penis in. This is the Pulse Plus. They also make just a regular Pulse, but the Pulse Plus has two vibrating plates. So there's a vibrating plate here, and I believe one back here. I can't remember if it's on the side or back, but I've talked to men with spinal cord injuries, and they felt like this was actually one said that they could ejaculate with this. And I just really like it because it can receive a flaccid penis. You can just, you don't have to squeeze, you don't have to hold it on, you can just put it on and lay it against your abdomen. This one is what I would call a humping vibrator. And like I said, I would love to actually use it or see it in person, but it's silicone. It has a vibrator here, and that's the vibrator, so that's the backside. You can lay it flat on something and lay on top of it. You can put it between two bodies. You can fold up these little wings, and it can be a vibration of a sleeve, a vibrator sleeve. I just feel like you can tuck it inside of underwear. I just feel like it has a potential of being really great for different types of disabilities. This is a pulsating vibrator. So you insert it in, and then you can just hold it in, and there is a little motor that makes it go in and out like this. So rather than needing to have the strength and coordination to do thrusting with a dildo, this one does thrusting on its own, as long as you can get it in. This is a G-spot vibrator, and yeah, so it curves in a way that hits right on the G-spot. It depends on the length of a woman's vagina. It could get onto the cervix, which if you want to watch the women's, the NorCal SCI women's talk, we talked a lot about the cervix and the vagus nerve. I have a feeling that if your vagina is short enough, that would go right in that spot. It'd be great to experiment with. Here is another vibrator that I think would be really great. You can just have someone help you get your fingers into it, similar to the thin finger vibe. And it can just stay in your hand without needing to have a good grasp. And then the Doxy wand, I put this here because it has really strong vibration. In fact, I looked up the specs on the Doxy wand, and its vibration speed is the same as those medical grade Ferticare at a fraction of the cost. You would need to get the one that plugs into the wall. The battery operated one is not as fast. There's a few other high speed vibrating wands, And I didn't look at the specs of all of them. I was just quite surprised at the Doxy one. And I've been told it's very strong. But when I looked up the specs, I was like, oh my, for $125, it vibrates as hard as an $800 Furticare. So something to think about. Okay, moving on. So here's some ideas around positioning equipment. This picture up here, this is a spreader bar with a padded cover, and the center of this bar is a metal bar, and this particular one has a padded cover on it, which I like because it protects your skin. On the end of spreader bars, there are cuffs. This one happens to have 2 on either side. I'm pretty sure they clip off, so you don't need to have all 4 of them at the same time. And I think what I can imagine is if the receptive partner is the one who has the spasticity, having the spreader bar on prevents both internal and external hip movements in spasticity. So even if you're laying flat or your legs are elevated over, say, a bolster like this, I think a spreader bar will really help with some of the spasticity. And on top of it, I loved this idea where the more active partner can, so the receptive partner has a spreader bar on and it goes over the active partner's shoulders. And that can just really help because the person on the bottom, if she doesn't have good leg strength or has spasticity, this is a really good position for someone who is the active partner who is strong and able to manage that. This is a silicone universal cuff. I think that would be great for lots of things. I think it's a little bit more, it can hold more things than a typical universal cuff. They're very inexpensive. You can get them on Amazon. But it should be able to help you hold a vibrator or a dildo. All right, a Hoyer is the ultimate sex swing, if you haven't figured that out on your own. So here I just put a picture of an actual sex swing, but the Hoyer is more sturdy, easier to get in and out of, and many people with a spinal cord injury already have them at home. So make good use of them. And bolsters, Liberator bolsters are really good quality, solid bolsters. This is actually 2 bolsters. They call it a ramp system. Yeah, I mean, you can use them separately, you can use them together for different positionings. And you can see here this receptive partner on the bottom laying over the bolster. And since we're here, this is called the intimate rider. So this man who's sitting on this little chair, he has a spinal cord injury. And this chair has a rocking device underneath it. And in this position, he's able, with little to no strength in his lower extremities, do a thrusting motion. And he can be, he can have his own erection, or he can be using a harness with a dildo, or just a positioning for any other kinds of play as well. You need to have good upper extremity strength and decent core strength in order to do a transfer wheelchair to the intimate rider chair. But for some people, they really like it. And then this bolster is also by Liberator, and I love how it has these pockets and holes in it so that it can hold toys for you. So, it's possible that you can set it up for yourself, but your strength isn't enough to hold something in place, like for instance, a big wand, they can be quite heavy. Or you can have a caregiver set them up and position it for you. And some sensory toys, ice and heat. Be very careful on areas of your body that don't have sensation. So use sensory toys just on the areas that you have sensation. But hot and cold is fun to play with, and masks are always great. That will increase your awareness of your other senses, because the eyes take in a lot of information. So if you take those out of the picture, it's quite interesting to find out where you have sensation and what you like and what you don't like. This is kind of like a feather duster. I think it, I got it from an online catalog for sex toys. So I think it has a little bow, makes it cute, but you can use a feather duster or a boa and playing with feathers. This is a paddle. Again, only use paddles and floggers on areas that you have sensation, and to do skin checks throughout playing with them and after. Yeah, so these are typically, floggers and paddles are typically used in more of like a kinky kind of sex play. They don't have to be. You can use them as sensory toys and just really lightly play with them. Or if you get some training and are extremely careful around areas that you are paddling or flogging, that can be a very fun sexual activity as well. And for good measure, I put in some fur nipple clips. So many people have sensitivity in their nipples, and especially if you have a spinal cord injury, typically your nipple sensation is still available to you. So it's fun to play with nipple clips. These just happen to have little fur balls on them, which makes them fun. And the nipple clips actually, they're like a clamp that has a little screw, so you can tighten and loosen it. You can make it very, very light, and you can crank it down if someone really wants a lot of intensity. And now it's Rafe.
I'll go talk a little bit about non-intercourse activities. So there are lots of things around sexual activities that you can do that don't involve intercourse. Sensation play, like we're talking about, there's all kinds of different ways you can explore how sensations feel on your body and in your body. So just exploring that, whether it be with your hand, or with a toy, whether it be with your mouth, your hair. There's just exploring, how does your body feel on its own, and how does it feel with a partner? And then, oral sex, using your mouth and using your tongue to explore parts of your body. Hand sex, which can also involve fingering and being able to stimulate people just with our hands in whatever way we can. One thing I've learned to do, my hands as a C5-6 quad don't work so good, but I have noticed that my thumb is I have pretty good control over it, and it has pretty much full sensation. So that's been a very kind of important part of my body that I've learned to explore, that really gives me a lot of pleasure and allows me to pleasure my partner too. So that's something, if you're a C5-6 quad, you might want to try that. Even if you're not, just explore with your hands and maybe your toes if you have a sensation there. Toys. We have a whole bunch of different kinds of toys. There are many different options and ways to make things accessible, even if they're not. Another area is erotic massage, and also masturbation can be really enjoyable. And if you know your body well, your partner knows her body or his body, then that can be a really fun activity and a big turn on.
More non-intercourse activities. So energetic sex. So Tantra is a Eastern style practice about how to create sensation in the body by moving energy through the body. And it is a skill that you can learn. And I find that it's one of the helpful skills to, just in general, I think that people like Tantra, but in particular, if you have sensory deficits like a spinal cord injury, learning how to generate and move an energetic sensations in your body, you can move that energy and experience sensation in areas that you don't have sensation. I know that might sound a little bit confusing, but there's like an internal pathway that is energetic and kind of tingly. Also, non-genital orgasms, which does have some overlap with Tantra. and something called a transfer of orgasm. And all of these I spoke about during the women's webinar, and I think Rafe spoke about them in the men's webinar too. So if you want to learn more, you can go watch those replays, but I'll go over it briefly. So transfer of orgasm is when you find another place on your body that when aroused and when stimulated in a way that is pleasurable, you can generate enough sensation and arousal to create something that feels like an orgasm, more of a full body orgasm, more of a wave through the body orgasm. And I find that people who have practiced some Tantra or learned some of the Tantric breathing techniques can make this transfer of orgasm happen more easily. So it's worth looking into. And then other non-intercourse types of sexual activity would be in the realm of what's called kink. And you can break those activities down into things like bondage, which is tying yourself, someone tying you up, you tying someone else up. Again, be careful of your skin in the areas that you do not have sensation. Dominance and submission. So that's more of thoughts, using your brain to create a playtime. And some people do this 24/7, and that's the kind of relationship they like to live. Most people in the kink scene have a playtime, a time in which they will play around with dominance and submission. So, I mean, I can even see something like, a master slave, if you'd like, or a mistress and houseboy. Some of that power dynamic that you can play around with. Also, sexy role playing. You can easily do the nurse and the patient role playing. Consensual, not necessarily with your caregiver, but you can play those roles with your lover. And pleasure and pain, so sensation play. So I just showed you some images of paddles and floggers and nipple clamps. So you can play with high levels of pain. It's good to get someone to mentor you, especially when you have sensation deficits, to make sure that you are not injuring yourself.
Okay, I know we're getting close to our time, so I want to try to be mindful of that. But there are lots of different devices for helping with erections and ejaculation. Let's see, I'm not familiar with the venous constriction.
Yeah, I can talk about some of these, and I have pictures on the next slide.
Sure.
Okay. Let me just go to the next slide, and I'll talk about them from there. So in this picture, this is a cock ring that's more in the kind of something that someone would see like more in the medical arena. And sometimes a cock ring by itself would be used if someone were to get an erection and then go ahead and put the cock ring on. It holds the blood in the penis. I'm going to, it's technically medical term would be the venous constriction ring. And the idea is that once you get an erection, you put the ring on. It's a stretchy ring, and that holds the blood in there. The other image here is of a pump. The medical term would be like a vacuum erection device or a vacuum pump. And it is a plastic cylinder. You place the penis flaccid in, and there is a pumping mechanism. This is just a very schematic drawing in which it pulls blood into the penis and creates an erection by more of a pulling, manually kind of pulling the blood in. And at the bottom of the pump is a cock ring. similar to one of these, but it's a part of the device. And then you take the tube, the plastic tube pump off, and the rubber cock ring stays in place to hold the blood in. Let's see. So intracavernous injections, one of the medications they use for that is Trimix. And here is an image of that. It is an injection that your doctor or nurse will teach you, and you do it at home. And you use a needle, a syringe with a tiny little needle, and through the shaft of the penis, you inject the medication into the spongy area in the penis, and it brings blood into the penis and creates an erection. I can't remember how long that lasts for, but at least an hour or more. I can't remember exactly. So I'm kind of speeding up because I know we're getting close to time. Penile vibratory stimulation. The medical devices would be called the Ferticare or the Vibratex. I actually just read a research paper that showed that the Ferticare, most men with spinal cord injuries felt like they got better erections and possibility of ejaculation with the Ferticare. In a doctor's office, if they are not getting, this is usually for like harvesting sperm for fertility. If they're not getting an ejaculation with either one of these, they can put a TENS unit on the abdominal muscles, and which will cause those muscles to contract, which will help with the ejaculation. And I'm just going to skip to here since we're talking about electricity and ejaculation. So electroejaculation is a medical procedure that happens in a doctor's office for the purpose of harvesting sperm. And it is a medical device that gets put into the anus and rectum, into the bowel. I think it's placed right next to the prostate, and they run an electrical current through there, and it creates muscle contraction to push the ejaculate out. And I just made a little note down here, retrograde ejaculation. Many men who have spinal cord injuries who do have an orgasm, the ejaculate backs up into the bladder rather than coming out through the penis. And the thought is there may not be enough muscular contraction to force the ejaculate out of the penis. So it gets pushed part of the way and then flows back into the bladder. Totally fine, totally healthy, nothing bad will happen. If that's the case, the next time you urinate, you'll see cloudy ejaculate in your urine. Okay, so here's a picture of the Ferticare that I just talked about. This plate here goes on the frenulum of the penis, which is towards the end, toward the head of the penis. And this is the Vibratex. It has two plates. One goes on the top and one goes at the bottom at the head of the penis. And Rafe. I don't know if Rafe is still, Rafe, can you hear me? So I'm going to just keep going. So these are medications for erections. The first three are oral medications, and they both have, they all have pros and cons to them. Some of them have side effects for certain people and not side effects for others. The length of erection duration, the amount of time that you'll have an erection is different from them. And I did not take the time to find out which is which. I can send that information along to Franklin, and he can email it out when he sends out links for the replay. And then midodrine is a medication for people who have a tendency or at risk for autonomic dysreflexia. So if your spinal cord injury is complete and it is at the T6 and above, you are more likely to have autonomic dysreflexia. So the midodrine is a prescription medication, and you would talk to your doctor about how to use it. if you're doing any sexual activity and you start having autonomic dysreflexic symptoms, should slow down or stop and change your position so that your head is up and your feet are down to take care of your blood pressure. That will lower your blood pressure. And Rafe was going to talk about medical cannabis, and I can just put the tiny bit that I know about it in it. So we live in California, and both medical and recreational cannabis is legal here. And many people report a feeling of more relaxed when they either smoke or vape or orally ingest cannabis. And they feel more in their body and more sensual, and it can help people focus more on their senses, which can help you get in the mood and feel more erotic and possibly have more likelihood of having some of these full body orgasm experiences. And then these are some medications that could have a negative effect on all three, desire, arousal, and orgasm. So all antidepressants have a risk of lowering arousal and heightening the threshold for orgasm, which means that you will need more stimulation for longer in order to have an orgasm. And for many people, when that happens, they start having desire difficulties because they're not particularly interested in having to, have higher levels of stimulation for longer periods of time, and it can be frustrating. So people on antidepressants can have negative effects for sexual activities, and never go off your antidepressants by yourself. That is not safe at all. Talk with your doctor about whether there are another antidepressant that would work for you better, and to follow your doctor's advice as to how to get off and to change over to a different antidepressant. Because it is important, if you need an antidepressant, to be on one. That different people have different sexual side effects with antidepressants, and there's a handful to choose from. If you're on a medication for hypertension, so that you have high blood pressure, that can, especially if you are likely to have autonomic dysreflexia, you need to be careful with getting so aroused, and that medication, you need to talk with your cardiologist and your general practitioner about sexual activity when you're on an antihypertensive. Baclofen is both good and bad. You want to have enough baclofen or antispasmodic in your system to help manage out of control spasticity during sex. But you don't want so much that your muscles are so relaxed that you are not getting the level of stimulation and a level of arousal in your body. So again, check with your doctor if you want to try to adjust the baclofen amount for improving your sexual activities. And that's it. It has been such a pleasure. I feel really honored and grateful that Franklin asked me to present this information, and I really hope it was useful. Feel free to reach out to me via email. The last slide has my email. I'm also the admin with Rafe on Facebook. It's a sexuality and disabilities support group. So please join that support group. I also moderate a Facebook group called Women's Intimacy After Injury. And off of Facebook, not on Facebook, I have a Women's Intimacy After Injury community. I moved that off of Facebook so that we would have more privacy. Basically, Facebook is not private at all. So if you'd like to join that community, and that community is just for women at this point. I may be opening it to men at some point when I have the bandwidth to do so. So here is the information. This right here is the web address to request membership. Free, it's free, but I screen people for the Women's Intimacy After Injury community site. And then here is my email address. Feel free to reach out. And that is it.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Rafe. We have a couple of questions. First question is someone wants to know, after they achieve orgasm, they seem to experience some significant headaches. And so they want to know if that's something that's kind of normal, if it's something that that they can control, have better control over it.
My first concern is autonomic dysreflexia, because for some people, not some, many people who have AD, that is one of the symptoms, that your blood pressure has gotten too high. So if that is, if your injury is at a T6 and above, you have experience with AD, I would say slow down before you get to a place of having an orgasm, and stop and change your position. Rafe, do you have any other ideas why a headache might occur?
That's the primary reason why, I would imagine. Your blood pressure is getting too high. So yeah, you just need to slow down and take a break and see if that helps. There's also, there is a medication besides Midodrine that actually can lower that threshold for reducing autonomic dysreflexia. And I thought I had that, but I can email it to Franklin, you can forward it to you. Or you can just check with your healthcare professional about it as well.
Yeah, she said that it happens right before and during orgasm, that she experiences more of this sharp, intense headache.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd say slow down and talk
Right.
to your doctor about whether there's any medication changes.
Okay. We have a question from sort of the husband of an elderly couple. He says that they have been accustomed to a certain sort of sexual life or an intimacy over 25 years, and now are having to kind of recreate everything or relearn everything, and they kind of just feel at a loss in terms of where to start. And this is a husband who has the spinal cord injury. Any sort of insight that you could provide to them for these longer term relationships that are introduced to intimacy following a spinal cord injury?
Yeah, so one of the a couple of the slides talked about it. The first thing is to just realize that both of you are grieving. You're in this together. It's hard. Everything has changed, and to really focus on connection. I'd say that the biggest focus would be intimacy. Spend at least sometime once a week, set yourself a date. I know there's a lot going on, but set up a date and just spend some time either holding hands or some naked skin to skin touching. It may go from skin to skin to more like caressing, exploring, but take the pressure off of having a goal around some sort of sexual activity. I think that's the best place to start. Yeah, if there's more questions about where to go from there, but I would say that's the foundation.
Okay. Next question is from someone who is frustrated because they're saying everything that used to happen automatically, from erection to ejaculation, everything is now a planned event. How do you add some sort of spice into the whole session?
I can comment on that one. There are plenty of things that don't have to be a planned event. A quickie intercourse is probably not on well, take that back. I like the thigh harness personally. You can, the person in the chair can put it on, and the receptive partner can climb on the lap, and that can be a quickie. But if you're wanting more skin to skin in bed, yeah, you're going to need to spend the time for dressing and transfers and positioning and all those things. And that being said, the mind is amazing. And yeah, the mind is the biggest sexual organ there is. There's plenty of time during the day to heavy flirting, being playful, use your mouth, lots of spontaneous things that can be done throughout the day. Yeah.
Okay. One of the participants says that the other medication that could help with AD is nalfetamine. Does that sound right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Next question is from someone who was injured at the age of 16, so they had no sexual experience before. Are they in a better position to sort of learn how to acclimate to sort of the new sex following a post-injury versus someone who has experienced sort of a normal sex before?
I don't think there's a better and a worse, you know. I was going to say there may be more grieving with a loss, but there's probably also grieving with knowing that it could have been a different way. You know, you have peers that are going through puberty and beginning to date and having sexual activity, and it's likely that you're not. So that's difficult emotionally as well. I mean, on the positive side, you get to learn you're not having to relearn what your body was before and what your body is now. So I don't, it's not, there's not a simple one is better than the other.
Right.
I'd say everyone can use support around it, especially because your peers are not going to be, it's likely that your peers are not having the same experience.
Okay. Next question. I have a hard time believing that a caregiver might feel comfortable assisting me with my sexual devices. What is the best way to not sort of screw up the whole relationship by asking that question? Basically, I guess they're saying that they could freak out their caregiver if they ask something like that.
You want to start, Rafe?
Well, that's definitely a possibility. I mean, depending on the caregiver. So you kind of have to tune into if this person is open enough to assisting you, and is that something really important and part of your life you need help with. So you have to be a little bit careful and mindful about who you make requests to, and also giving people plenty of options to say no. So if it's something they're not comfortable with, say that's not, it's totally fine. If you're not comfortable helping me set up my, my dildo, or help me put on a condom, I can find someone else who can help me with it. So I think that's one approach to taking some of the pressure off, but still getting your needs met.
When you're advertising for a caregiver, is that something that you should sort of disclose sort of in the advertisement, or wait until it gets to be an in-person interview?
Well, some of the words I put in, I just say person's looking for someone who's sex positive. I just kind of put those words in there so they kind of get that that's something that's part of my life. And
Okay.
that's what I advertise for that.
All right.
Rafe and I talked about this kind of at length when I'm making that slide. It really depends. I think it depends on the area where you live. We live in the Bay Area, so the term sex positive is more people might know what that term means. If you live somewhere and even you don't know that term, it's likely that someone who's reading your ad for a caregiver might not know that term. So I think it's really helpful to be really specific, like, I am dating. I expect to have people come over. These are the kind of tasks that I would need some help with. How do you feel about it? Rather than just like, hey, I'm going to need some help around my sexuality. I can see someone either not applying for the job if they read that in the ad, or once you're talking with them about it, kind of the deer in the headlights, sort of like, ah. But if you make it very kind of matter of fact and really spell out the task, then they know what to expect, and you can go from there.
Okay, fair enough. All right, that's all the questions that we had. We had a very shy audience today. All right, everyone. So as both Lisa and Rafe mentioned, we had a version or a presentation for men and women earlier this week. So everyone is going to get all 3 videos sent to them this weekend, the male, the female, and then tonight's presentation. So because both Rafe and Lisa referred to various parts of those presentations that it would behoove you to become sort of knowledgeable about. So rest assured that we'll be sending you links to all 3 of the sessions. So I want to thank Lisa and Ray for taking the time out of their Friday night and really for this week to make these presentations available. And I want to thank those of you that stuck around to view these presentations. Have a great weekend and happy Halloween to everyone as well.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.